Thank you all. So the organizers of this critically important conference have done me an honor by including me, and you all do me a great honor by listening to me. Meditation is often thought of as a solitary activity. To meditate, one normally withdraws from the company of others. Members of the Religious Society of Friends, commonly known as Quakers, meditate, or as Quakers say, contemplate, collectively. My paper focuses on Quaker collective contemplation, what we call meeting for worship. The personal motivation and contemplative practices of Friends would in some ways be immediately intelligible to their contemporary meditators in the Vajrayana world. In Bhutan, as in England in the mid-17th century, when Quakerism was established, certain individuals embarked on lifelong journeys over oceans rather than mountains because they were compelled spiritually. The pioneer members of the Religious Society of Friends often became driven in their teen years when they recognized the vanity and brutality of the world in which they found themselves. Like the young prince who became Buddha, they became so distressed with what they discovered in their world that they left family and home to find teachers and answers. Quaker pioneers traveled the world, from England to the English colonies in North America and in the Caribbean, largely to preach against slavery. In other ways, the contemplative practices of Quakers are a world away from that of Buddhists. Quakerism was established under the leadership of George Fox, who taught that clergy were unnecessary. Quaker pioneers, such as Fox and his wife Margaret Fell, understood that God is to be found within everyone. They believed that the church is constituted wherever Christians are gathered. Membership in the Religious Society of Friends grew quickly in England in the middle of the 17th century. Many were drawn to the idea, and still are drawn to the idea, that there is a divine light in each of us, and that one can find in silent gathering with others the solid ground for a personal commitment to honesty at all times and to peaceful behavior without exception. Today there are roughly 400,000 Quakers worldwide, about 140,000 in the United States. The largest group by continent live in Africa. The core practices of the Religious Society of Friends, collective contemplation and silent witnessing, arguably make Quakerism the most meditative and the least clerical of scores of Christian denominations. Quaker worship is based on the promise made by Jesus Christ, as reported in the New Testament by the Apostle Matthew, that, quote, "Where 2 or 3 are gathered together in my name, there I am in the midst of them," end of quotation. Quaker worship is preparation for being moved to speak honestly and to act peacefully. At Quaker meeting, auditory silence is combined with mental stillness. Quaker pioneers were opposed to preachers in their own places of worship, and some even challenged preachers in other people's places of worship, for which they were imprisoned and sometimes hanged. Mary Dyer, from my home state, the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, chose to be hanged rather than to leave the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, where she was preaching to the Puritans that they ought to not listen to the sermons of their ministers. And thousands of other Quakers were imprisoned or killed for merely not attending state-approved church services. Outside of their preacherless meetings for worship, Quaker founders preached with great energy against cruelty to other people, especially the practice of slavery, and even cruelty to animals, which was a radical idea in 17th century England and the English colonies in North America and the Caribbean. John Woolman, for example, out of his concern for the suffering of animals, chose to walk hundreds of miles rather than to ride by horseback because he was concerned about giving pain to the horse. He remarked in his journal as well on the occasion of his companion's killing of 4 rattlesnakes, and I quote, that he had a quick and lively feeling of the affliction of his fellow creatures, the snakes, whose situation in life is difficult, end of quote. This is all the more remarkable in his cultural milieu when snakes were considered to be agents of Satan. Benjamin Lay, when likewise traveling to counsel slaveholders to emancipate their slaves, ate berries and nuts, which he collected himself rather than meat, so that he would not cause harm to animals. And we can, of course, draw parallels here between Buddhist and Quaker compassion toward all sentient beings. There are, of course, expectedly great differences in the contemplative practices of Quakers and those of Buddhists. Quakers, as far as I know, I might be corrected a bit later, do not use visualization to recognize conditioned existence. They do not envision themselves as green Tara, attending to wandering mother sentient beings. They don't visualize themselves as Manjushri, cutting through conceptual confusion. If visualization is used in Quaker worship today, it might well have come from attenders' exposure to Buddhist practices. The intention of Quakers at meeting is to find enlightenment and enlightening words in silence and stillness, and if so moved, to offer those words to the meeting if they believe those words can benefit members of the meeting. William Penn is probably the best known Quaker, certainly in the North American colonies. He advised his children, and I quote, "Love silence, even in the mind, for thoughts are troublesome. Much speaking as much thinking spends, and in many thoughts as well as words there is sin. True silence is the rest of the mind, and is to the spirit what sleep is to the body, nourishment and refreshment. Silence is a great virtue. It covers folly, keeps secrets, avoids disputes, and prevents sin." End of quote. It is said that to be as honest and peaceful as Jesus Christ, Quakers need only listen to what is referred to in meetings as the inner teacher, which is understood to be the Holy Ghost. In fact, Quakers do need external teachers, and these are often their parents and other elders. And of course, the Bible. At worship, Quakers gather in a meeting house, a simple room with benches arranged so that worshipers face each other. There's no center or sacred place in a meeting house. There is, of course, no pastor. There's no program, although I should say that some Quakers have semi-programmed meetings. Instruction comes from within, in silent anticipation with others and reflecting on what other worshipers may say when they're moved to speak. One listens very carefully. For collective silence and mental stillness allow one to be moved. And if so moved, anyone may rise to speak. Meetings are places to listen for spiritual insights, especially for the insights of our elders. At the same time, some of the most prized meetings are those where nobody speaks. And after meeting, people normally refer to the theme of the silence. Worshippers can use meeting to quiet their thoughts, to silent internal chatter. People sit with their eyes open or with their eyes closed. They may look at one another, acknowledge one another with a smile, During the period of contemplation, memories emerge of those with whom one has worshipped, often family members who've passed from this world. Great gratitude emerges for the demonstration of the power of love that those elders and family members have shown us, the power of love that requires us to be at all times honest in our speech and at all times peaceful in our actions. Forgive me, my pages are out of order. I'll just speak without notes that at the end of the meeting, which is normally an hour, people will shake hands and greet each other. So I have sort of in conclusion, three observations that might be of interest to this gathering. One is that there is a touch of the divine madman in the Quaker pioneers. For example, Benjamin Lay, in the middle of the 17th century, he was scarcely 4 feet tall. He'd been twisted by spinal atrophy since he was a child. He would go into his meeting, and this is to shock his friends, fellow worshipers, with a dagger under his cloak, a Bible that had been filled with fake blood, and rise to speak, stab the Bible, blood spurts out, wants to shock those Quakers who are slaveholders or who are not advocating against slavery. Soon, Quakers outlawed the practice of slavery. One was expelled from the society if one held slaves. So that's the first observation, that there is a touch of that divine madman. The second thing that might be of interest to this gathering is the relationship between silence and enlightenment. The words that we look for at a Quaker meeting are those that can help others to understand what is right and true to say and to do. The third observation is that this contemplation encourages action. In our meeting house, for example, in Wellesley, Massachusetts, we gather in silent witnessing outside of immigration and customs enforcement facilities. We want to acknowledge the detention of those who've been detained. They see us, they understand that we are on their side, they smile. Those who are ICE officers who are doing the detaining are shamed by our presence. They wear masks. They might achieve some enlightenment in that process. Folks here might also like to know that Quakers were behind the court case that the Trump administration is ignoring. Federal judges ruled that it was a violation of the First Amendment to have ICE officers enter houses of worship. Folks also might like to know that Quakers have started something called the North Star Fund, where we assist and help to travel with and house immigrants who are being persecuted by the Trump administration, those who want to claim political asylum in Canada. So I'll stop there. If we have a minute left, I want to invite you folks to sing a Shaker song that we also sing at Quaker worship. And my lovely colleagues have... "'Tis a gift to be simple, 'tis a gift to be free, 'tis a gift to come down where we ought to be. And when we get to the place that is right, we will be in the valley of love and delight. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Christopher, for this insight, for a moment to make music with the flute, I liked, and for the insight that the strongness of the Quakers in nonviolence and peacefulness is rooted in mindfulness, in silence, and in contemplation. Thank you.